Today, I want to ask you a simple question. Where does and where should our energy come from? Now, I know we've all heard of energy in the form of renewables, such as wind and solar, and the form of non renewables, just such as coal, oil, and gas. But today, I hope to teach you about another way of generating energy. You may have already heard of it, nuclear. And now, I get that there's bad blood around it, nuclear energy, and it has a lot of bad rep, but I'm hoping today to clear that air by not only addressing some of the issues, but also giving more benefits it can provide on top of those issues. You see, that's because I believe nuclear energy is the way of the future, due to its limited space usage, almost renewable energy, and energy independence that it provides. So let's start off by shedding some light on all of the bad juju it gets. If you take a look at this table taken from a study done by professors at the University of Oklahoma, the main risks that surround nuclear are both misuse at the plant and in transportation, as well as a risk and fear of terrorist use, or in other words, nuclear warfare. And I'm here to tell you that while these risks are very much real, they're not nearly as dangerous as they might seem. You see, there are agencies around the world, such as the NRC here in the US and the IAEA, which is a governing body for global cooperation run by the UN. And these agencies not only mandate the design, cooperation, and operational standards for plants, but they're also there to make sure that the nuclear energy and the waste it produces is properly used and disposed. So the threat of nuclear weaponry, if strict regulations can be followed, then the transport of uranium can be closely guarded to ensure that no militant groups are able to get their hands on it. However, as Al-Hinawi says, measures designed to prevent theft of nuclear materials and attacks on nuclear installation have been tightened in recent years. Welcome as those measures are, the evidence indicates that the risks are presently real and will tend to increase with the further spread of nuclear technology. So all that really means is, yes, the risks exist, but as long as we keep a focused eye and keep regulating, we can make sure these risks never happen. Now that I've addressed the bad, how about we take a look at the good? Let's start by talking about the space that is needed for these nuclear power plants. According to the US Department of Energy, an average 1,000 megawatt facility requires little more than 1 mile of space. When compared to other forms of renewable energy, nuclear immediately takes a spot at first place. For wind energy, it requires 360 times the amount of area, and for solar energy, it requires 75 times amount of space. With that, nuclear energy is extremely dense. If you look at this picture I'm going to provide, it takes about one little pellet to make something equal to 1,000 tons of coal. And for reference, according to the National Mining Association, a person only uses about 3.4 tons of coal in their lifetime, which means about 3.4 of those tiny little pellets. Unfortunately, nuclear energy isn't quite as ideal as it may seem. You see, nuclear isn't 100% renewable, meaning that there is some form of waste. But as I told you guys just now, the energy density means that the amount of waste generated is nothing compared to the tons of waste that oil and coal and gas can produce. Emissions such as ash and smoke and CO2 into the atmosphere, and 90% of what's left over can be used again, meaning that nuclear has a big difference on other one-use non-renewables. Another way that nuclear beats non-renewables is by the energy independence it provides. As I said before, 90% of what's left over can be used again, meaning that you don't need to keep buying more and more, such as when you have to use oil or gas or coal. And that means that you can keep using it. Along with that, just like oil, there's uranium reserves around the world. But the main difference, according to Jay Edmonds, is uranium ore costs represent an incremental fraction of the cost of electricity from nuclear power. In these scenarios, uranium ore costs as a percentage of the cost of nuclear energy range from 2 to 10% at most. Unlike these other energy sources where a large amount of the cost is simply procuring the resources from the earth, uranium is the opposite. Thus meaning that the price of uranium fluctuate very little compared to that of oil and coal, which is heavily affected by supply and demand. All in all, I hope you learned a little bit more about why nuclear is such a great option for energy generation and why it's underutilized today. While it's definitely struggled from public scrutiny, its low space, high energy production, and ability to provide energy independence to countries and the low price fluctuation make it very valuable, especially today and heading into the near future. When small one pellet is the same as tons and tons of coal, I think we all know what is the right choice for us and for our future.